Marcus Johnson was a man who had fought hard to get where he was. Born into a modest family in a small town, he had grown up watching his parents work tirelessly just to make ends meet. But Marcus wasn't the kind of person to let circumstances define him. From a young age, he dreamed big and worked even harder. By his mid-30s, he had built a successful tech company that employed hundreds of people and generated millions in revenue. He was now one of the most respected black CEOs in the country, a title he wore with pride but also with caution. Despite his achievements, Marcus knew all too well that success didn't shield him from prejudice. On this particular day, Marcus was flying first class on a major airline to attend an important business meeting. The flight was long, and he planned to use the time to relax before diving into negotiations. As he boarded the plane, he greeted the flight crew with a polite smile. Sarah, the flight attendant assigned to his section, nodded curtly, but didn't return the warmth. At first, Marcus didn't think much of it. People were often busy or distracted during boarding, and he assumed she was simply focused on her tasks. Once everyone was seated and the plane took off, Marcus settled into his seat, pulling out his laptop to review some documents. After about an hour, hunger began to creep in. He glanced at the menu card tucked into the seat pocket in front of him. The airline boasted gourmet meals for first-class passengers, so Marcus decided to order lunch. He pressed the call button near his armrest, and within moments Sarah appeared. Her expression was neutral as she asked what he'd like to eat. Marcus chose the grilled chicken dish, expecting something fresh and flavorful. "Thank you," he said with a friendly nod. Sarah muttered a quick, "You're welcome," before walking away. When the meal arrived, Marcus's stomach growled in anticipation. But as soon as the tray was placed in front of him, something felt off. The smell hit him first, a faint, sour odor that made his nose wrinkle. Confused, he leaned closer to inspect the food. His heart sank when he saw it. Patches of greenish mold covering parts of the chicken. For a moment, he thought he must be imagining things. Surely a first-class meal wouldn't be served in such a state. But no, the evidence was undeniable. Moldy food on a plate meant for paying customers who had paid thousands of dollars for their tickets. Marcus looked up to find Sarah nearby, collecting empty cups from other passengers. He raised his hand slightly to get her attention. When she approached, he pointed at the plate and said calmly, "Excuse me, there seems to be a problem with my meal." She glanced at the tray briefly, then shrugged. "It's probably fine," she replied dismissively. "Just eat around it." Marcus blinked, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. Was she serious? He gestured toward the mold again, his voice firmer this time. "This isn't acceptable. I need a replacement." Instead of apologizing or offering to fix the issue, Sarah rolled her eyes and sighed loudly. "Some people just can't be satisfied," she muttered under her breath as she turned to walk away. Her words stung more than Marcus cared to admit. He sat there staring at the plate, feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. This wasn't just poor customer service. It felt personal. Determined not to let the situation escalate, he pressed the call button again. This time, a different flight attendant came over. Marcus explained the issue, showing them the moldy chicken. The second attendant seemed genuinely apologetic and promised to bring a new meal right away. When the replacement arrived, Marcus hoped it would be better. But to his dismay, it was worse. The chicken was cold, dry, and clearly reheated, the kind of dish you'd expect from a cheap diner, not a luxury airline. It was as though they hadn't even tried. Marcus felt a growing sense of anger bubbling inside him. He called the second attendant back and voiced his dissatisfaction. "I'm sorry," they said, looking genuinely embarrassed. "Let me see if we can do something else." But Marcus could tell this wasn't going to end well. He glanced around the cabin, observing how Sarah interacted with other passengers. That's when he noticed something troubling. Whenever she served white passengers, her demeanor changed completely. She smiled warmly, engaged in light conversation, and offered extra assistance without hesitation. Yet when it came to passengers of color, including himself, her tone was clipped, her movements rushed, and her attitude indifferent. Realization dawned on Marcus, slowly but surely. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern. Sarah's behavior wasn't just careless, it was discriminatory. And while Marcus understood that racism wasn't new, experiencing it firsthand in such a blatant way left him shaken. He prided himself on being composed, on handling difficult situations with grace. But this was different. It wasn't just about the moldy food anymore. It was about being treated as less than human because of the color of his skin. As the flight continued, Marcus wrestled with his emotions. Part of him wanted to confront Sarah directly, to demand answers and accountability. Another part of him knew that doing so might only escalate the tension. So, he decided to wait until the plane landed. In the meantime, he began formulating a plan. This wasn't going to go unnoticed. Someone needed to speak up, not just for him, but for every passenger who had ever been treated unfairly because of their race. By the time the plane touched down, Marcus had made up his mind. He wasn't going to let this slide. What happened next would spark a chain reaction far beyond anything he could have imagined. As the plane taxied to its gate, Marcus felt a surge of determination. He knew what he had to do. Pulling out his phone, he discreetly opened the camera app and began recording a video. Sitting upright in his seat, he looked directly into the lens, his expression calm but resolute. "Hi, my name is Marcus Johnson," he began, his voice steady and clear. "I'm a black CEO and I just experienced something unacceptable on this flight." He held up the moldy chicken dish, making sure it was visible on camera. "This is what they served me in first class, a meal covered in mold. When I pointed it out to the flight attendant, she dismissed my concerns and told me to eat around it." Marcus paused for emphasis, letting the absurdity of the situation sink in. But it didn't stop there. The replacement meal was cold and barely edible, and throughout the flight, I noticed how differently the same flight attendant treated other passengers based on their race. Marcus went on to describe Sarah's behavior, the warm smiles and attentive service she gave to white passengers versus the indifference and rudeness directed at him and others who looked like him. "This isn't just about bad customer service," he said firmly. "This is racism, plain and simple, and it has no place in any industry, especially not one that serves people from all walks of life." Before ending the video, Marcus called for accountability. "I'm sharing this because someone needs to speak up. If you're traveling with this airline, ask yourself, are you being treated fairly? And if you work here, demand better training and policies to ensure incidents like this don't happen again." With that, he stopped recording, saved the file, and uploaded it to his social media accounts. He tagged the airline and added hashtags like "RN Accountability Matters" and "Stop Racism" in travel. Within minutes, the video gained traction. Marcus watched as likes, comments, and shares poured in. People were outraged, calling out the airline for its apparent lack of care and professionalism. Many shared their own stories of discrimination during flights, revealing a pattern of bias that extended far beyond this single incident. Some recounted being ignored by flight attendants, while others described receiving subpar meals or even being removed from flights without cause, all because of their race. Journalists quickly picked up the story, amplifying Marcus's message. Across news outlets, headlines blared phrases like "Black CEO exposes racist treatment on luxury flight" and "Airline under fire after serving moldy food to first-class passenger." Reporters reached out to Marcus for interviews, eager to hear more about his experience and perspective. For the first time in his life, Marcus found himself thrust into the spotlight, not as a successful entrepreneur, but as an advocate for change. The airline scrambled to respond. Within hours, they released a generic statement on Twitter. "We are aware of the recent allegations regarding one of our flights and are actively investigating the matter. Customer satisfaction is our top priority, and we apologize for any inconvenience caused." But the response fell flat. Critics pointed out that the statement avoided addressing Marcus directly or acknowledging the racial undertones of the incident. Instead of quelling the backlash, it only fueled more criticism. Meanwhile, Marcus received an overwhelming wave of support. Messages flooded his inbox from people around the world, thanking him for speaking out. Fellow entrepreneurs praised his courage, while activists hailed him as a role model for standing up against injustice. Even strangers chimed in, expressing gratitude for bringing attention to an issue many had faced, but few dared to confront publicly. Among the messages were offers of help. Lawyers specializing in discrimination cases offered their services pro bono, while civil rights organizations invited Marcus to collaborate on initiatives aimed at combating systemic racism in the travel industry. One message stood out in particular, a note from a young black professional who wrote, "Thank you for showing us that we don't have to stay silent when we're treated unfairly. You've inspired me to keep pushing forward despite the obstacles." Encouraged by the response, Marcus decided to take things further. He drafted a letter addressed to the airline's CEO, detailing not only his experience but also proposing concrete steps to prevent similar incidents in the future. In the letter, he emphasized the need for comprehensive diversity and inclusion training for all employees, regular audits of customer service practices, and transparent reporting mechanisms for passengers to report discriminatory behavior. He ended the letter with a challenge. Your company has the opportunity to lead by example. Will you rise to the occasion? Once the letter was ready, Marcus sent it via email and posted it online, ensuring maximum visibility. The move cemented his role as more than just a victim of poor service. He became a catalyst for meaningful change. His actions sparked discussions not only about racism in the airline industry, but also about broader issues of inequality and representation in corporate America. As days turned into weeks, the pressure on the airline mounted. Passengers canceled flights, investors expressed concern, and employees spoke out internally, demanding reforms. Behind closed doors, executives debated how to salvage their reputation. They reviewed security footage from the flight, interviewed staff involved in the incident, and analyzed customer feedback. It didn't take long for them to confirm Marcus's account. Faced with undeniable proof, they terminated Sarah's employment immediately. But firing one employee wasn't enough to satisfy the public outcry. Critics argued that the problem ran deeper, pointing to a lack of diversity and inclusion training among the airline's workforce. Social media users criticized the airline's initial response as tone-deaf and inadequate, urging them to take stronger action. Under mounting scrutiny, the airline announced a series of reforms aimed at improving workplace culture and customer relations. These included mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, the establishment of a diversity task force, and partnerships with organizations focused on racial equity. While some applauded these efforts, others remained skeptical. Could the airline truly transform its culture, or were these measures merely performative? Marcus himself acknowledged that change wouldn't happen overnight. "It's a step in the right direction," he told reporters during an interview. "But real progress requires sustained effort and accountability. We'll be watching to see if they follow through." For Marcus, the victory felt bittersweet. On one hand, he was proud to have sparked meaningful dialogue and pushed for reform. On the other hand, he knew this was just the beginning. Discrimination wasn't unique to airlines. It existed in every industry, including his own. Determined to lead by example, Marcus vowed to implement similar initiatives within his company, ensuring that his employees felt valued and respected. Regardless of their background, the incident had taught him an important lesson. Silence perpetuates injustice. By speaking up, he had not only held the airline accountable, but also inspired countless others to do the same. As he reflected on everything that had transpired, Marcus realized that this moment was bigger than him. It was about creating a world where everyone could travel and live without fear of being judged by the color of their skin. Little did Marcus know, this was only the start of a journey that would redefine his legacy forever. The aftermath of Marcus's viral video and letter to the airline's CEO sent shockwaves through both the aviation industry and society at large. For days, the story dominated headlines, with analysts dissecting every detail, from Sarah's dismissive behavior to the airline's initial lackluster response. Social media buzzed with debates about systemic racism, customer service standards, and corporate accountability. People from all walks of life weighed in, sharing their opinions and personal experiences. The incident had struck a nerve, forcing many to confront uncomfortable truths about bias and inequality. For Marcus, the whirlwind of attention was both empowering and exhausting. Every morning he woke up to dozens of notifications on his phone, messages of support, interview requests, and updates on the growing movement sparked by his actions. While he appreciated the encouragement, it also added pressure. He knew that being thrust into the spotlight came with responsibility. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about setting an example and driving real change. One day, as he sat in his home office scrolling through social media, Marcus stumbled upon a hashtag that had gained momentum. Fly with dignity. It was started by passengers who wanted to hold airlines accountable for discriminatory practices. Posts under the hashtag ranged from heartfelt stories of mistreatment to calls for stricter regulations. Some users even shared photos of subpar meals or ignored complaints, echoing Marcus's own experience. Reading these posts reminded him why he had spoken out in the first place. Racism wasn't isolated, it was pervasive, woven into the fabric of institutions that claimed to serve everyone equally. Marcus decided to amplify the movement. Using his platform, he encouraged others to share their stories and tag the companies involved. "Let's make sure no one feels invisible," he tweeted. Within hours, thousands joined the conversation, flooding airlines' social media pages with demands for transparency and reform. Journalists covering the trend reached out to Marcus for comment. In interviews, he emphasized the importance of collective action. "Change doesn't happen because of one person," he said during a live TV segment. "It happens when we stand together and demand better." Behind the scenes, the airline scrambled to contain the fallout. Internally, executives convened emergency meetings to discuss next steps. They reviewed security footage from Marcus's flight, confirming his account of Sarah's dismissive attitude and poor treatment. Employee testimonies painted a troubling picture. Sarah had a history of similar complaints, though none had been addressed seriously until now. Realizing they couldn't ignore the evidence, the airline terminated her employment immediately. But firing Sarah didn't solve the deeper issues plaguing the company. Critics argued that the problem extended beyond individual employees. It was systemic. Employees of color reported feeling marginalized within the organization, citing microaggressions, unequal pay, and limited opportunities for advancement. Passengers of color described facing everything from rude remarks to outright hostility during flights. These revelations painted a grim portrait of an industry struggling to adapt to a diverse and increasingly vocal customer base. Under mounting public pressure, the airline announced a series of reforms aimed at addressing these concerns. First, they committed to implementing mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all staff, from flight attendants to executives. Second, they established a task force dedicated to identifying and eliminating discriminatory practices. Third, they partnered with civil rights organizations to develop transparent reporting systems for passengers to file complaints without fear of retaliation. Finally, they pledged to diversify their leadership team, ensuring that decision-makers reflected the communities they served. While some praised these initiatives as steps in the right direction, others remained skeptical. Activists pointed out that such measures were often implemented after scandals, but rarely led to lasting change. "We've seen this playbook before," wrote one commentator. "Companies promise reforms, then quietly scale back once the media moves on. Will this time be different?" Marcus shared these concerns. During a podcast interview, he acknowledged the risk of performative allyship. "Words are cheap," he said. "What matters is action and consistency. We'll know if they're serious by how they follow through." Despite the challenges ahead, Marcus felt hopeful. The overwhelming support he received reinforced his belief in the power of community. Strangers reached out to thank him for inspiring them to speak up. Fellow entrepreneurs offered advice on navigating the complexities of advocacy. Even competitors expressed admiration for his courage. One particularly touching message came from a young black woman named Jasmine, who wrote, "Your story made me realize I don't have to tolerate disrespect at work. Thank you for showing me that my voice matters." Inspired by the outpouring of gratitude, Marcus began thinking about ways to expand his impact. He realized that while holding the airline accountable was important, true progress required tackling systemic inequities across industries. As a successful Black CEO, he understood the unique challenges faced by underrepresented professionals. From biased hiring practices to toxic workplace cultures, barriers existed everywhere. Determined to create opportunities for others, Marcus decided to establish a foundation focused on supporting aspiring leaders of color. The foundation, which he named Rise Together, launched 6 months after the flight incident. Its mission was simple yet ambitious: to empower underrepresented individuals to break through barriers and achieve their dreams. Through scholarships, mentorship programs, and networking events, Rise Together provided resources and guidance to help participants navigate the complexities of professional life. Marcus personally mentored several young entrepreneurs, offering advice on everything from securing funding to building inclusive teams. One of the foundation's flagship initiatives was a leadership boot camp designed for mid-career professionals. Participants spent weekends learning from industry experts, honing their skills and connecting with peers. Many described the experience as transformative, crediting the program with boosting their confidence and opening doors they never thought possible. Before joining Rise Together, I didn't believe someone like me could succeed in tech, said Jamal, a software engineer who attended the boot camp. But Marcus showed me that I belong here and that I can thrive. As word spread about the foundation's success, Marcus became a sought-after speaker. Invitations poured in from conferences, universities, and corporate events. Whether addressing a room of executives or a classroom of students, Marcus spoke passionately about the importance of representation and equity. His speeches blended personal anecdotes with actionable advice, leaving audiences inspired and motivated to drive change in their own spheres. During one keynote address, Marcus shared a story that resonated deeply with listeners. When I was starting my business, he recalled, I often walked into rooms where no one looked like me. People doubted my abilities, not because of what I did, but because of who I am. For a long time, I let those doubts creep in, but eventually I realized something. If I didn't believe in myself, no one else would. So I kept going, not just for me, but for everyone who comes after me. His words struck a chord, earning him standing ovations and countless messages of gratitude. Yet despite the accolades, Marcus remained grounded. He understood that true progress required more than speeches and applause. It demanded sustained effort and collaboration. To that end, he worked tirelessly to build partnerships with other organizations committed to diversity and inclusion. Together, they hosted workshops, published research, and advocated for policy changes at both local and national levels. By the end of the year, Marcus's influence had grown exponentially. What began as a single act of defiance on a plane had evolved into a global movement for equality. Airlines weren't the only ones taking notice. Companies across industries were re-evaluating their practices, spurred by the conversations Marcus had ignited. For the first time in a long time, Marcus allowed himself to feel proud, not of his wealth or titles, but of the ripple effect he had created. Still, he knew there was much work to be done. Discrimination wasn't confined to airplanes or boardrooms. It permeated every aspect of society. From education to healthcare to housing, systemic inequities persisted, affecting millions of lives daily. Marcus vowed to keep fighting, using his platform to shine a light on these issues and push for meaningful solutions. As he reflected on the journey so far, Marcus felt a profound sense of purpose. Being a Black CEO came with challenges, yes, but it also came with opportunities to lead by example. By speaking out against injustice and investing in future generations, he hoped to leave a legacy that transcended business success. After all, what good was achievement if it didn't inspire others to rise? With that thought in mind, Marcus turned back to his laptop, ready to tackle whatever came next. As the months passed, Marcus Johnson found himself in a position he had never anticipated, a symbol of resilience and change. His decision to expose the airline's discriminatory practices had not only transformed his life, but also ignited a broader conversation about racism and inequality. Yet with this newfound influence came challenges. The more Marcus spoke out, the more scrutiny he faced, not just from critics but also from those who doubted whether one person could truly make a difference. Despite the pressure, Marcus remained steadfast in his mission. He understood that progress was rarely linear. It required patience, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Every morning, he started his day by reading messages from people who had been inspired by his actions. Some shared stories of overcoming adversity, while others thanked him for giving them the courage to confront discrimination in their own lives. These notes reminded Marcus why he had taken this path in the first place: to create a world where everyone could thrive without fear of prejudice. One message in particular stood out. It came from a young man named Elijah, who wrote, "Mr. Johnson, I'm 19 years old, and I've always dreamed of becoming an entrepreneur. But growing up, black in a small town, I've been told time and again that my dreams are too big for someone like me. Your story made me realize that maybe they're wrong. Maybe I can succeed if I work hard enough." Reading Elijah's words filled Marcus with a mix of pride and responsibility. He responded personally, encouraging Elijah to keep believing in himself and offering to mentor him whenever needed. Inspired by such interactions, Marcus decided to expand Rise Together, the foundation he had created to support underrepresented professionals. He envisioned it as more than just a resource hub. It would be a movement, a community where individuals could find strength in shared experiences and collective action. To achieve this, Marcus launched several new initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity across industries. One of these initiatives was a nationwide campaign called See Me, Hear Me, designed to amplify marginalized voices in corporate America. Through partnerships with major companies, the campaign encouraged employees to share their experiences, both positive and negative, through anonymous surveys. The goal was to identify areas where organizations fell short and provide actionable recommendations for improvement. Within weeks, thousands of workers participated, shedding light on issues ranging from pay disparities to exclusionary workplace cultures. The data collected during the campaign revealed startling trends. For instance, nearly 70% of respondents reported experiencing some form of bias at work, whether overt or subtle. Many cited instances of being overlooked for promotions, excluded from key meetings, or subjected to microaggressions. Others described feeling tokenized, used as symbols of diversity without being given real opportunities to contribute meaningfully. These findings underscored the urgent need for systemic change, a realization that resonated deeply with Marcus. Armed with this information, Marcus collaborated with experts in diversity and inclusion to develop a comprehensive toolkit for employers. Titled Building Equitable Workplaces, the guide outlined practical strategies for creating environments where all employees felt valued and empowered. From implementing blind recruitment processes to establishing employee resource groups, the toolkit provided step-by-step instructions for fostering inclusivity. Marcus distributed copies to hundreds of businesses, urging leaders to prioritize equity, not as a checkbox exercise, but as a core value. His efforts didn't stop there. Recognizing the importance of representation at every level, Marcus advocated for diversifying leadership teams. During a panel discussion hosted by a prominent business magazine, he emphasized the need for accountability. "It's not enough to hire diverse talent," he said. "You have to ensure they have seats at the table and that their voices are heard. Otherwise, you're perpetuating the same systems of exclusion you claim to oppose." Marcus's advocacy extended beyond corporate settings. He began working closely with educators to address inequities in schools, particularly in underserved communities. Partnering with local nonprofits, he funded programs that provided students with access to technology, mentorship, and career readiness training. One such program, called Future Leaders Academy, offered workshops on entrepreneurship, coding, and financial literacy. Participants learned skills that would prepare them for success in a rapidly evolving job market. Seeing the impact of these efforts firsthand reinforced Marcus's belief in the power of education. At a graduation ceremony for future leaders, Academy, he addressed a group of high school seniors, many of whom were the first in their families to pursue higher education. Your potential is limitless, he told them. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Use your talents to build a better future, for yourselves and for others. While Marcus celebrated these victories, he also grappled with moments of doubt. Critics accused him of overstepping, claiming that his focus on race overshadowed other forms of discrimination. Others dismissed his initiatives as performative, arguing that true change required structural reforms rather than individual actions. Though these criticisms stung, Marcus refused to let them derail his mission. Instead, he leaned into the discomfort, using it as fuel to push harder. During a particularly challenging week, Marcus received an email from Sarah, the former flight attendant whose actions had sparked the entire ordeal. In the message, she apologized profusely, admitting that her behavior had been wrong and expressing regret for the harm she had caused. While some might have dismissed her apology as insincere, Marcus chose to respond with grace. "Thank you for reaching out," he wrote back. "Acknowledging mistakes is the first step toward growth. I hope this experience encourages you to reflect on how we can all do better." Sarah's apology marked a turning point for Marcus. It reminded him that change was possible, even in unlikely places. People weren't defined solely by their worst moments. They had the capacity to learn, grow, and evolve. This realization deepened his resolve to continue advocating for empathy and understanding, even in the face of resistance. As the year drew to a close, Marcus reflected on how far he had come. What began as a single act of defiance on a plane had blossomed into a multifaceted movement for equality. Airlines, corporations, and communities were starting to take notice, reevaluating their practices and policies to align with principles of fairness and inclusion. Though the road ahead remained long, Marcus took solace in knowing that he had planted seeds of change, seeds that would continue to grow long after he was gone. In interviews, Marcus often spoke about the importance of legacy. "Success isn't measured by what you accumulate," he said during a podcast episode. "It's measured by the impact you leave behind. If I can inspire even one person to believe in themselves or challenge injustice, then I've done my part." His words resonated with listeners, earning him a reputation as both a visionary leader and a champion for human dignity. Looking back, Marcus acknowledged that none of this would have been possible without the support of those around him. His family, friends, colleagues, and countless strangers who had rallied behind his cause. Their encouragement reminded him that he wasn't alone in this fight. Together, they had shown that when people united against injustice, they could move mountains. With renewed determination, Marcus turned his attention to the future. He knew there were still battles to be fought, barriers to break, and hearts to change. But he also knew that he had the tools and the courage to keep going. As he sat in his office overlooking the city skyline, surrounded by reminders of his journey, Marcus allowed himself a quiet moment of gratitude. Then, with a deep breath, he picked up his pen and began drafting plans for the next chapter. After all, the work was far from over, but neither was his resolve. As the new year began, Marcus Johnson found himself at a crossroads. The movement he had sparked was gaining momentum, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had become more than just a CEO or an advocate. He was now a symbol of hope for countless individuals who saw themselves in his story. Yet, with every victory came new challenges, and Marcus knew that sustaining the momentum required not only passion but also strategy. One morning, as he sipped his coffee while reviewing emails, Marcus stumbled upon an invitation that caught his attention. It was from a prestigious global summit focused on social justice and equality. Organizers wanted him to deliver the keynote address, framing it as an opportunity to share his vision with leaders from around the world. At first, Marcus hesitated. Public speaking wasn't something he took lightly, especially when addressing such a high-profile audience. But after some thought, he accepted, realizing this could be a chance to amplify his message on an even larger stage. The day of the summit arrived, and Marcus stood backstage, nerves buzzing through his body. As he waited for his turn to speak, he reflected on how far he'd come since that fateful flight. Back then, he never imagined his life would take this turn. Yet here he was, about to address thousands of people, including policymakers, activists, and corporate executives who looked to him for guidance. When Marcus stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, he exuded confidence as he approached the podium. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady and warm. "My name is Marcus Johnson, and I'm here today because of a plate of moldy chicken." The crowd chuckled softly, easing the tension. "That meal," he continued, "wasn't just food gone bad. It was a reflection of a system that devalues certain lives based on the color of their skin." He went on to recount his experience, weaving personal anecdotes with broader insights about systemic racism. He spoke about the importance of representation, not just in leadership roles but in everyday interactions. When we exclude people, whether intentionally or unintentionally, we strip them of their humanity, he said. And when we strip someone of their humanity, we fail as a society. Toward the end of his speech, Marcus issued a call to action. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen alone. If you're serious about creating a fairer world, start by listening, not just hearing, but truly listening, to those whose voices have been silenced. Then act. Use your privilege, your platform, your resources to lift others up, because when we rise together, we can achieve extraordinary things. The audience erupted into applause, many rising to their feet. Afterward, attendees lined up to speak with Marcus, eager to learn more about his work and how they could contribute. Among them was a young woman named Priya, a tech entrepreneur from India. "Your words gave me chills," she told him. "I've faced discrimination too, but hearing you talk about turning pain into purpose inspires me to keep going." Encounters like these reminded Marcus why he kept pushing forward. Each conversation, each connection reignited his sense of purpose. And yet, despite the progress, he couldn't ignore the obstacles still standing in the way. For every company that embraced diversity initiatives, there were others that resisted, claiming such efforts were unnecessary or divisive. For every individual inspired to speak out, there were others too afraid to rock the boat. Determined to tackle these barriers head-on, Marcus launched a bold new initiative, a documentary series titled Breaking Barriers. The project aimed to highlight stories of resilience and triumph from underrepresented communities. Through interviews, archival footage, and expert commentary, the series explored the roots of inequality and showcased innovative solutions being implemented worldwide. Episodes covered topics ranging from workplace discrimination to educational inequities, offering viewers a comprehensive look at the issues and the changemakers working to solve them. Producing the series proved challenging. Funding was tight, and securing interviews with influential figures required persistence. But Marcus refused to compromise. He poured his energy into ensuring the final product was authentic, impactful, and accessible to audiences of all backgrounds. When the first episode premiered, it received rave reviews. Critics praised its raw honesty and compelling storytelling, while viewers expressed gratitude for shedding light on often overlooked struggles. The success of Breaking Barriers opened doors for Marcus in unexpected ways. Invitations poured in from universities, community organizations, and government agencies seeking his expertise. One particularly meaningful collaboration came from a coalition of mayors committed to making their cities more inclusive. Together, they developed a blueprint for equitable urban development, focusing on affordable housing, public transportation, and access to healthcare. Marcus traveled across the country, meeting with local leaders and residents to gather input and ensure the plan addressed real needs. These experiences deepened Marcus's understanding of the interconnectedness of social issues. Racism, he realized, didn't exist in isolation. It intersected with poverty, gender inequality, environmental injustice, and more. Addressing one without considering the others was futile. This realization led him to expand Rise Together to Us scope, incorporating programs focused on climate justice, women's empowerment, and immigrant rights. By taking a holistic approach, Marcus hoped to create lasting change that benefited everyone, not just a select few. Despite his growing influence, Marcus remained humble. He understood that no matter how much he achieved, there would always be critics questioning his motives or dismissing his efforts. Some accused him of using his platform for self-promotion, while others argued that systemic problems required government intervention rather than grassroots activism. Though these comments sometimes stung, Marcus chose to focus on the positive impact he was making. "Criticism comes with the territory," he told a close friend during a rare moment of vulnerability. "But if I let it distract me, I'll lose sight of what matters." To stay grounded, Marcus leaned on his support system. His wife, Lisa, played a crucial role in keeping him balanced, reminding him to celebrate small victories and prioritize self-care. Their 2 children, Maya and Elijah, provided endless joy, grounding him in the simple pleasures of family life. Evenings spent playing board games or sharing meals became sacred rituals, allowing Marcus to recharge before diving back into his work. As Rise Together continued to grow, Marcus sought ways to involve younger generations. He launched a youth ambassador program, recruiting teenagers passionate about social justice to serve as advocates in their schools and communities. Ambassadors organized workshops, fundraisers, and awareness campaigns, proving that age was no barrier to making a difference. Watching these young leaders in action filled Marcus with pride and optimism. "They're the ones who will carry the torch," he often said. "If we equip them with the tools and knowledge they need, the future will be brighter than we ever imagined." By mid-year, Marcus's efforts had garnered international recognition. He was invited to speak at the United Nations General Assembly, where he delivered a powerful address urging global leaders to prioritize equity in policymaking. "Inequality isn't just a domestic issue, it's a human issue," he declared. "Until we address disparities wherever they exist, peace and prosperity will remain elusive." His words resonated deeply, earning him a standing ovation and sparking discussions among delegates. Several countries pledged to adopt policies inspired by Rise Together's model, signaling a shift toward greater inclusivity on a global scale. For Marcus, this marked a pivotal moment, a testament to the ripple effect of speaking truth to power. Yet amidst the accolades, Marcus never lost sight of his roots. He frequently returned to his hometown, hosting events to give back to the community that had shaped him. Whether mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs or funding scholarships for local students, he ensured his success benefited those who needed it most. "I didn't get here alone," he reminded himself, "and I won't leave anyone behind." As the year drew to a close, Marcus reflected on the journey thus far. What began as a single act of defiance had evolved into a lifelong commitment to justice. Challenges remained, yes, but so did opportunities. With each passing day, Marcus grew more convinced that change was possible, if people dared to dream big and work together. And so, with renewed determination, he prepared to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that the fight for equality was far from over. But neither was his resolve. As the years passed, Marcus Johnson's legacy continued to grow. What had started as a single act of defiance on an airplane had transformed into a global movement for equality and justice. His name became synonymous with resilience, courage, and unwavering determination. Yet despite the accolades and recognition, Marcus remained focused on the work that still needed to be done. He knew that true progress wasn't measured by headlines or awards, but by the lives touched and the systems changed. One crisp autumn morning, Marcus sat in his office overlooking the city skyline. The walls were adorned with framed photos, some of his family, others of him speaking at rallies or shaking hands with world leaders. But the most cherished item on his desk was a handwritten note from a young girl named Amara. She had attended one of Rise Together's workshops and written to thank him for inspiring her to dream bigger. "Before I met you," she wrote, "I thought people like me couldn't change the world. Now I know we can." Reading those words filled Marcus with a sense of purpose that no amount of wealth or success ever could. That day, Marcus received an email that would mark another turning point in his journey. It was from the CEO of a major airline, the same company whose discriminatory practices he had exposed years earlier. The message began with an apology, acknowledging the harm caused not only to Marcus but to countless passengers over the years. More importantly, it outlined the steps the airline had taken to address systemic issues within their organization. From mandatory diversity training to transparent reporting mechanisms, they had implemented nearly all the recommendations Marcus had proposed in his letter. The email ended with an invitation. "We would be honored if you would join us as a keynote speaker at our annual leadership conference. Your voice has been instrumental in driving change, and we believe your insights could inspire our team to continue building a more inclusive future." Marcus read the message twice, his mind racing with thoughts. On one hand, he felt vindicated. His efforts had forced a powerful corporation to confront its flaws and take meaningful action. On one hand, he wondered whether accepting the invitation might be seen as forgiving too easily. After much deliberation, he decided to attend, not because he sought reconciliation, but because he saw an opportunity to hold them accountable publicly. When the day of the conference arrived, Marcus walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. Dressed in a tailored suit, he stood tall, exuding confidence and grace. As he began his speech, he didn't shy away from addressing the past. 3 years ago, I sat in one of your planes, served moldy food, and treated as though my concerns didn't matter, he said, his voice steady. That experience taught me something important. Silence perpetuates injustice. If we don't speak up, nothing changes. He went on to commend the airline for taking steps toward reform, but emphasized that accountability required consistency. Policies are meaningless without action, he reminded the audience. True inclusion isn't about checking boxes. It's about creating environments where everyone feels valued and respected. And that takes daily effort. By the time he finished, the room erupted into applause. Many attendees moved to tears by his words. After the event, several executives approached Marcus to express their gratitude. One of them, a senior vice president named Rachel, shared how his advocacy had inspired her to push for greater diversity within her own department. "You've shown us what leadership truly looks like," she said. "Thank you for holding us accountable, and for believing that we can do better." Moments like these reinforced Marcus's belief in the power of collective action. Change wasn't achieved by individuals working alone. It happened when people came together, challenged norms, and demanded better. With this in mind, Marcus expanded Rise Together's reach even further. He partnered with international organizations to tackle global inequities, from access to clean water in underserved communities to bridging the digital divide in remote areas. Through these collaborations, he demonstrated that justice knew no borders. It was a universal pursuit. Back home, Marcus continued mentoring young professionals, ensuring that the next generation of leaders reflected the diversity of the world they served. He hosted monthly roundtable discussions inviting entrepreneurs, activists, and policymakers to share ideas and strategies for creating equitable societies. These gatherings fostered connections that transcended industries, sparking innovative solutions to age-old problems. Yet even as Marcus celebrated victories, he faced setbacks. Not every initiative succeeded, and not every partnership yielded results. There were days when frustration threatened to overwhelm him, when funding fell through, policies stalled, or critics dismissed his efforts as futile. On those days, Marcus leaned on the lessons he had learned throughout his journey. Perseverance mattered more than perfection, and failure was simply part of the process. Lisa often reminded him to celebrate small wins, no matter how insignificant they seemed. "You can't pour from an empty cup," she'd say, urging him to take breaks and recharge. Their weekends became sacred, a time for family hikes, movie nights, and laughter-filled dinners. These moments grounded Marcus, reminding him why he fought so hard, to build a better future for Maya, Elijah, and children like Amara. By the end of the decade, Marcus's influence extended far beyond what he had imagined. Rise Together had grown into a global network, empowering millions of individuals to challenge injustice and create opportunities for themselves and others. The documentary series Breaking Barriers had won multiple awards, reaching audiences in over 50 countries. Schools adopted its curriculum, teaching students about the importance of empathy, equity, and activism. Marcus himself had become a household name, featured in textbooks and documentaries as an example of how one person could spark meaningful change. Yet, he never let fame define him. In interviews, he always redirected attention to the movement, emphasizing that he was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. "This isn't about me," he'd say. "It's about all of us. When we stand together, we can move mountains." As he approached his 50th birthday, Marcus took stock of his life. He had built a successful business, raised a loving family, and dedicated himself to a cause greater than himself. But perhaps his greatest accomplishment was knowing that he had inspired others to believe in their own potential. Letters from strangers poured in regularly, thanking him for showing them that change was possible, even against seemingly insurmountable odds. On his birthday, Marcus gathered his closest friends and family for a quiet celebration. As they toasted to his achievements, Lisa raised her glass and said, "To Marcus, not just a husband, father, or CEO, but a beacon of hope for so many. You've shown us that courage and compassion can transform the world." The room erupted into cheers, and Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. For all the challenges he had faced, he wouldn't trade this moment for anything. Looking back, Marcus realized that his journey had come full circle. That flight attendant's dismissive attitude had once left him feeling powerless, but it had also ignited a fire within him. A fire to fight for justice, to lift others up, and to prove that no obstacle was too great if tackled with determination and unity. As the night drew to a close, Marcus stepped onto his balcony, gazing at the city lights twinkling below. He thought about the countless lives touched by the movement he had helped build. Somewhere out there, a young girl was dreaming of becoming a scientist. A teenager was organizing a protest against climate change. An aspiring entrepreneur was drafting a business plan late into the night. Each of them carried a piece of his legacy, proving that the ripple effects of courage could last a lifetime. With a deep breath, Marcus smiled. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but he was ready. Ready to keep pushing, keep fighting, and keep inspiring. Because as long as there were injustices to confront and dreams to nurture, Marcus Johnson would be there, leading by example and reminding the world that true greatness lay not in titles or trophies but in the courage to rise together.